Hi, welcome to Raj Online. In this video, we are going to discuss about how this business requirements document we prepare. Because as a part of business analyst, understanding the requirements of the customer, followed by this providing a solution for the customer requirements is essentially important. To gather the requirements from the stakeholders, of course, we follow different practices like either you can conduct some focus groups, brainstorming sessions, or we may conduct some interviews with the stakeholders, or else conducting some chat session where we inviting all the stakeholders and we try to understand the requirements, their perceptions, expectations, all that. So once we have gathered all the requirements, end of the day, these requirements has to be implemented technically by the development team. If a development team wants to develop the requirements in real environment, if they wants to develop the functionalities for the customer needs or the customer requirements of the project, they need some detailed explanation over the kind of problem what customer is facing and what kind of solution to be given, etc., etc. So being a business analyst, it is not something possible to explain all the requirements in a oral format, which is not usually possible because there are a lot of requirements are there for any of the project. Sometimes these requirements will be in sense of changes will also be taken place over a period of time. So addressing all these and changing requirements from time to time and whatever the changes to be made, everything we have to know. So for that, preparing a business requirements document is essentially important because there are a couple of documents in the process of traditional model, because there are two different models we use. One is traditional model, second is agile. So traditional model, something like waterfall model, V model, all that. As a part of requirements communication to the stakeholders, to the development team, all business analysts have to prepare a couple of documents, something like business requirements, functional and non-functional requirements document, software requirement specification. All these will be prepared by the BA. At the same time, if you follow agile practices, instead of preparing documentation, we write user stories. So it's a short description of requirement in a form of user story will be written in the agile environment so that people will understand much better, right? So this is what generally we do. Of course, to write user stories, there are different tools people use, something like Jira, Azure DevOps, all that. So it depends on the kind of tool which they are opting for. So this will vary. So that is a different thing altogether. But end of the day, being a business analyst, one should be knowing about how to communicate requirements with the team, technical team is essentially important. So for that, the very first document, what is that we have to prepare is called business requirements document. But make sure once you got a clarity over the business problem, all this document will be prepared. And there are possibilities that sometimes these requirements can be changed over a period of time, which is a continuous process. So this is what the template which I am showing you. Business called business requirements document template. Organizations will provide these templates usually when we are working on real environment, but there are some slight variations from document to document. Maybe there are some slight variations, but end of the day, what aspects to be covered under the requirements document, one the same. It will not change anymore. In this requirements document, let me explain you from the point to point. This is all about the glossaries, like terms like about the same time, document information, all that. This is all TOC kind of, I can say. So after that, the document revision history is the first one, because document revision history is mandatory for every document. This is not something I'm addressing for BRD. Even we are preparing software requirement specifications or whatever it is. Document revision history is something inevitable because whatever the changes are we making over a period of time in the existing document, sometimes project related versions, right? So 1.2, right? So maybe second product we are developing 2.2. Right? So project or a product you're developing 2.2, right? There are some differences between 1.2 to 2.2. So version, based upon the version, there are some changes might be taken place when we are working on the project, because application developing solutions to the customer needs is a continuous process. This is not the process which will be confined only for a particular time. Depends on the kind of customer they belongs to. Requirements will keep on addressed by the customer. So wherein we have to understand all this, and we need to make necessary changes in the existing project, which is a continuous process. So even though the document was prepared by us initially, there are possibilities that changing in documentation, which is something essentially important. So what changes we have made, when we have made the changes, all these things we have to know. This is what generally we call it as document revision history, stands for point number 1. So that in this document revision history, we come to know what are the changes we have made, why are these changes we have made so far, and what was the description of the particular change. All these things has to be explained in the document revision history. This is first the point. This is the first. Followed by this, we need to mention about the glossary of terms. Of course, I have written some terminologies in reference to the point of sale system, because this is what generally I have taken this relating to a point of sale system, because point of sale system is a cloud-based point of sale system. This is what the case study I have taken. So on this case study, I'm just preparing this document, because this is the case study here. You can see this case study is all about, or else itself you can consider this as a project. This is the case study that Betting Shop Systems is an organization who is developing point of sale systems to different retail store owners. So they have identified some business problem in it, right? So based on the business problem, whatever the business problem they have identified, they want to provide a cloud-based point of sale system. That is what exactly this case study is all about. Developing a cloud-based point of sale system is what the decision was taken by Betting Shop Systems. So this is a case study I'm explaining to you. So because how to prepare a business requirements document, for that, one should understand about the case or a business problem is essentially required. So for that, I have taken this. So in this Betting Shop Systems, they have identified some business problem. So based on that, whatever the possible solutions to be provided according to the requirements of the customer, they have identified developing a cloud-based point of sale system is the right choice, right? So you can see here, developing a cloud-based point of sale system is what generally the solution which Betting Shop Systems has identified. So for that, there is a product name which was mentioned by them, which is called Account. Account is what generally a project name, which was the name of the product they have created. Subsequently, they have identified some business problems. What are the business problems and all? Over a period of time, when I'm explaining about business requirements document, I'll explain this, right? So this is what case study. Assume that you are a BA. This is the project you are working on. The first thing you must be knowing about how this has to be translated into a document format. So for that, document revision history, as I mentioned you in the beginning, that is point number 1. That comes in regular. That's not the one which you will be preparing on the day first. Second, glossary of terms. What are the different terminologies we want to use in this project? That we have to mention. The kind of terminologies, the kind of definitions, what is that we want to use. All these things has to be mentioned, because whenever there is a project we develop, there is a documentation which is called project documentation, or user manuals will be prepared by us. So when we are preparing project documentation, the documentation can be read by anyone, right? So because necessarily need not be the people coming from retailing domain, say, point of view or something like that, right? So one should understand about the terminologies and what is the definition for those terminologies is essentially required. So on the grounds, glossary of terms we have to mention. For example, point of sale system, right? So which is nothing but point of sale system, POS. ACAD, what is ACAD stands for? It's a cloud-based point of sale. Product name of a cloud-based point of sale system was named after called ACAD. Now, Betting Shop Systems is what acronym, which is a vendor who is going to develop the point of sale system, right? So these are the terminologies which I was mentioned here. For example, Windows Azure, because if you see the case study, which I've shown you. So they have explained here very clear that they are using Windows Azure as a platform to develop it. Because if you want to develop a cloud POS system, You require some cloud service provider to develop. So for that, they have taken Windows Azure as a platform here. So Windows Azure, right? For example, Windows Azure is what I have taken. What is Windows Azure is here? Windows Azure is nothing but a cloud-based uh, service provider, right? Something like Amazon and all. It's a cloud-based service provider is what generally Windows Azure stands for. So this is how generally these terminologies, definitions, and all everything will be given under the glossary of terms. Followed by this, here we need to write down the purpose, right? So purpose of writing the documentation is essentially important. So whenever we are going to write here, we need to write the purpose of preparing this document. This is essentially required. One have to understand. So purpose of why this documentation we are preparing and for what reason we are going to prepare this document is what we need to understand. At the same time, this document will make you a clear understanding about which will be used to gain agreement with the stakeholders and to provide foundation communication to the technology and as well as solution provider. So unless until if you don't give this purpose, unless until if you don't know the understanding behind the purpose behind preparing this documentation, then there will be of no value. So writing down the purpose of documentation is essentially required. At the same time, this document will also gives us clear glimpse over the kind of agreement happening between the stakeholders and as well as technical service providers. That information has to be mentioned under the purpose. This is the first point. Second, we talk about audience. Audience means people who are involving in the process, means people, the list of project team members, project sponsors, business owners, all the key stakeholders. Those details will be mentioned under the second one. Now the third part is criteria. Criteria means what kind of criteria the projects are belongs to, because it could be a low medium projects or it could be medium or complex projects, right? So based upon the matrix or the complexity, these criteria will be decided. Usually this criteria matrix and all will be decided by the project management team with the help of BA team and all that. What kind of matrix do we require to follow to develop these projects? All these things has to be mentioned in this criteria. Followed by this, here we have to mention about the timings. Timings means how much time will it be taken for us to complete the project is what we have to. Because this is where generally it comes with project planning. So whenever we are working on project planning, so this is where it comes with. So whenever we are working on project planning, how much time will it be taken? All these things and all these things has to be mentioned here. This is what generally the timing stands for. Means how much time will it be taken for us to complete the project, right? So this decision will be taken care of by the project manager. This is all something we have to mention here under the timings part. Followed by this, here we need to write down the naming conventions. Naming conventions means what are the naming are we going to use? That naming convention has to be updated equally. Means what are the different naming conventions are we going to use? For example, when you want to mention about the date, right? So how you are going to represent the date? So that's how generally these naming conventions and all are being used. So purpose is important. At the same time, audience has to be mentioned in the documentation itself, criteria, followed by the duration of the project, what is that we are going to take, followed by this naming conventions as well. So after that, here we need to write down the project manager name, right? So name of the project manager, who is managing this project, and who is the sponsoring for the project. Because for every project, there will be a sponsor who has invested some X amount of money. So project sponsor details has to be mentioned equally. At the same time, business owner, who is the business owner here, followed by IT owner, has to be mentioned. Apart from that, here we need to write down the description of the project, what exactly this project is all about and what are the high level goals we want to achieve, right? So this project is all about developing a cloud-based point of sale system, which will be used by all the retail owners, irrespective of the size of the retail owner, it could be used by all the retail owners, so that they can use this POS system for their business needs, right? So this is what generally the description which I have written under the description of the project. So this is how generally the project description which we have to write. So description of the project is essentially important, and we have to write down the description of the project here equally. So after that, here we need to write down the purpose, right? So what was the purpose of writing down the documentation? For what reason we are developing this purpose? So this part I'm going to explain in the coming video. This is the first video which I have made it for BRD. In the second video, I explain about the scope of the project followed by the problems, all these things to you. Okay, thank you.